r/confession I sued my neighbor who stole my dead mom's inheritance. Hashtag chunk 1. I'm staring at the will document for the 100th time, and my hand still won't stop shaking. The lawyer had called me 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. I'd already buried my mother, already scattered her ashes in the garden she loved, already boxed up most of her belongings while trying not to fall apart every 5 seconds. I was finally starting to breathe again, or at least, I was starting to think I might eventually be able to breathe again, when the phone call came that made my entire world collapse sideways. Ms. Patterson? This is James Chen from Chen and Associates. I'm calling regarding your mother's estate. I remember where I was standing. In the kitchen of my tiny apartment, making tea because I couldn't seem to do anything else productive anymore. The Earl Grey was still steeping when my legs literally gave out and I had to sit down on the linoleum floor like some kind of helpless child. My mother had changed her will. 3 months before she died. 3 months before the cancer finally took her. And she'd left everything to Richard. Richard. Our neighbor of 15 years. The man who'd been coming over twice a week to help her with groceries. The man I'd actually thanked profusely, multiple times, when I had to quit my job as a marketing coordinator to become her full-time caregiver. The man my mother had called the son she never had in a moment of what I thought was just typical maternal exaggeration. She'd left him the house. The house I grew up in. The house where my father and I scattered the last of my mother's ashes. Worth approximately $480,000 in today's market. And $200,000 in liquid assets from her life insurance and retirement accounts. I got nothing. Not a single thing. The version of the will that my mother had discussed with me, the one she'd explicitly told me about when she was still coherent enough to have those conversations, left everything to me. Which had made sense. I was her daughter. I was supposed to inherit. It was supposed to help me recover financially from the year I'd spent as an unpaid caregiver, burning through my savings while watching her die by inches. But the official will, the one filed with the court and verified by her lawyer, told a completely different story. I read the lawyer's letter again for the 100th time, each word feeling like a small knife. Your mother, Margaret Elizabeth Patterson, in full possession of her mental faculties and of sound mind, did on June 14, 2023, create a new last will and testament, superseding all previous documents. Full possession of her mental faculties. That phrase kept twisting in my gut. My mother had Alzheimer's. It was progressing slowly at first, then faster, then so fast I couldn't keep track of the good days anymore. By June, she was having memory lapses. Not constantly, but enough that she'd repeat herself in conversations. Enough that she'd call me by my aunt's name sometimes. Enough that she once accused me of stealing her wedding ring, only to find it in her nightstand drawer the next morning with no memory of having accused me at all. And in June, right in the middle of all that, she suddenly had the clarity to completely rewrite her will and leave everything to the neighbor she'd known for 15 years instead of the daughter she'd raised for 28. Right. I had called the lawyer back immediately. There must be a mistake, I'd said, and I could hear the desperate hope in my own voice, like I was begging him to tell me this was all some kind of administrative error. My mother had Alzheimer's. She wouldn't have. According to the document, your mother was evaluated by her physician prior to signing, James Chen had said, not unkindly. The doctor verified her competency at the time. Her signature is witnessed by 2 individuals. Who? I demanded. Who witnessed it? There was a pause. I heard the sound of pages turning. Richard Matthews and Linda Cho, who appears to be a notary public. Of course. Of course Richard had arranged for witnesses. Of course he'd had a doctor verify her competency, probably some physician he'd found, or paid, or convinced, or however the hell you convince someone to sign off on an Alzheimer's patient's mental fitness. That was 3 weeks ago. Now I'm sitting in a chair across from a different lawyer, Janet Morrison, recommended by a friend of a friend, who specializes in elder law. My hands are shaking again. They've been shaking on and off for 3 weeks, ever since I learned that my inheritance, my future, my mother's entire legacy, had been quietly signed away to the man who'd been slowly, methodically insinuating himself into our lives. Tell me everything, Janet says. She's in her 50s, with sharp eyes and the kind of expression that suggests she's seen every variation of human betrayal there is. Start from the beginning. When did you first meet Richard Matthews? I take a breath. Then another. I was 13, I say. He moved in next door. And he's been there ever since. Hashtag chunk 2. He was always the perfect neighbor, I tell Janet, and I can hear the bitterness in my own voice now. It's starting to crack through the shock. The kind of person who makes you feel guilty for not being a better person yourself, you know? He'd mow our lawn without being asked. He'd fix things on the house. He was at every barbecue, every holiday. My parents loved him. Janet takes notes, her pen moving steadily across a legal pad. And your father? Is he still alive? He died when I was 24. Heart attack. Very sudden. I pause, realizing how that sounds. How convenient that must seem. Richard was actually at the hospital. He drove my mom there because she was too upset to drive herself. He stayed the whole night in the waiting room with us. He sounds very involved, Janet observes carefully. He was. He is. I lean forward, trying to make her understand. Look, I'm not stupid. I've had 3 weeks to think about this, and I know how this looks. But Richard wasn't some obvious predator. He was just, always there. And when my dad died, he became even more present. He'd check on my mom constantly. He'd bring over meals. He'd invite her to things. And she loved the attention, especially after losing my dad. I stand up and pace to the window of her office, looking out at the street below. The autumn sunlight looks too cheerful for this conversation. Things got different when she got sick, I continue. About 18 months ago, she had some memory issues. Nothing diagnosed at first, just moments where she'd lose her train of thought. My dad had died of a heart attack, so she'd been alone for 4 years at that point. I was living with my boyfriend in the city, working full-time. I'd visit on weekends, but I wasn't there every day. And Richard was? Janet prompts. Constantly. He was the one who first suggested she go to a doctor about the memory issues. He was the one who drove her to her appointments. When she got the Alzheimer's diagnosis, I stopped, swallowing hard. When she got the diagnosis, I moved back home. I quit my job. And Richard suddenly became even more involved. He'd come over every single day, sometimes twice a day. He'd help me with her care. He learned how to give her insulin shots when her diabetes got worse. Your mother was diabetic? Type 2. Had it for years, but it got more complicated as the Alzheimer's progressed. She'd forget if she'd taken her medication. She'd forget to eat properly. I turned back to face Janet. And Richard took over so much of that responsibility. At the time, I was grateful. I was exhausted. I was watching my mother disappear in front of me, and I was doing everything, bathing her, dressing her, managing her medications, cleaning up, accidents. Richard would come over and just take things off my plate. He'd sit with her while I showered. He'd help her eat dinner. He'd read to her. When did you notice things changing? Janet asks. Not until the lawyer's call, I admit, and the shame of that admission burns my face. I trusted him. Everyone trusted him. Why wouldn't we? He'd been in our lives for 15 years. He loved my mother, or at least, that's what I thought. What I wanted to think. Janet sets down her pen. Tell me about the will change. When exactly did it happen? June 14th, according to the legal document. That was about 3 months before she died. Maybe a little less. I sit back down, gripping the arms of the chair. By June, she was pretty far along. She still had good days and bad days, but the bad days were getting more frequent. There was a week in early June where she didn't recognize me at all. She called me by my aunt's name for 3 days straight. And yet she had the mental clarity to change her entire will on June 14th? According to the doctor who evaluated her, yes. But here's the thing, I don't even know if that evaluation actually happened on June 14th. I only have the lawyer's word that the document is dated June 14th. I don't have any medical records showing when the doctor saw her. I've been trying to figure out who the physician was, and it's been impossible. The lawyer just says it was handled and verified. Janet's expression sharpens. You don't have the name of the evaluating physician? No. When I asked the lawyer, he said he'd have to check his files and get back to me. That was 3 weeks ago. He hasn't gotten back to me. I watched Janet's jaw tighten slightly. That's irregular. Have you reached out again? Once, by email. No response. Okay. She makes more notes. What about the 2 witnesses? You mentioned Richard Matthews was one? And a notary public named Linda Cho. I tried to find her contact information online. There are 3 Linda Chos who are licensed notaries in the state, but none of them seem to have any record of working for Richard or having any connection to my mother. I called 2 of them, and they both said they didn't do the notarization. Janet looks up from her pad. Did you reach the 3rd one? I couldn't find her contact information. She's the oldest of the 3, and as far as I can tell, she may have retired. We can work on that, Janet says thoughtfully. What I'm most concerned about right now is the evaluation. That's the key to everything. If we can prove your mother didn't have the mental capacity to understand what she was signing, we can challenge the entire will on the grounds of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. Isn't that harder to prove though? I ask, and I can hear the desperation in my voice now. I mean, I know she was sick, but she had good days. A judge could say that she just happened to have a good day when she signed the will. Possibly, Janet acknowledges. But we have something stronger than just her testimony. We have the Alzheimer's diagnosis. We have medical records showing her cognitive decline. And if we can prove that Richard orchestrated this, if we can show a pattern of manipulation, financial incentive, and control, we can argue that even if she technically had capacity, she was unduly influenced. I feel a small flicker of hope, and then immediately, another thought crashes into it. He's going to deny everything, I say quietly. And he's been living in my mother's house for the past 3 months. He's had access to all her records, all her files. If there's anything that would prove what he did, he could have destroyed it by now. Janet meets my eyes steadily. Then we'd better move fast, she says. Hashtag chunk 3. The drive back to my mom's house, Richard's house, apparently, takes 40 minutes in rush hour traffic, and every single minute of it I'm thinking about what Janet said. We'd better move fast, the implication being that with every day that passes, evidence disappears. Files get shredded. Hard drives get wiped. The notary's records fade further into the past, harder to track down. I pull into the driveway around 5:30 p.m., and Richard's truck is already there. Of course it is. He's basically moved in, and why wouldn't he? He owns the place now. Or thinks he does. I sit in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I haven't seen him since the lawyer's phone call, 3 weeks ago. I've been avoiding the house as much as possible, staying at my boyfriend Mark's apartment in the city, only coming back to grab things I need. But I need to be here more now. I need access to my mother's files, her medical records, anything that might help build the case. The front door opens, and Richard steps out onto the porch. He's wearing jeans and a polo shirt, looking exactly like he always does, salt and pepper hair, that easy smile, the kind of guy who looks comfortable everywhere. He waves. I get out of the car. Hey, stranger, he calls out as I walk up the driveway. Haven't seen you in a while. Have you been? The casual friendliness of it makes my stomach turn. How does he do that? How does he just pretend like nothing has happened? Like he didn't steal my mother's entire future and leave me drowning in debt and grief? I'm fine, I say, keeping my voice neutral. I need to get some of my things from my room. Of course, of course. Come on in. He holds the door open like he's welcoming me into someone else's home. Maybe he thinks he is. Actually, I was hoping we could talk. I feel like we've gotten off on the wrong foot here, and I'd really like to straighten things out. I pause. Janet's voice echoes in my head, asterisk, don't discuss the legal action with him. Don't admit you're gathering evidence. Don't tip your hand, asterisk. I'm kind of in a rush, I say. I just need to grab a few things. It'll only take a minute, he says, and there's something in his tone that makes my skin crawl. Not threatening, exactly, but persistent. Like he's used to people doing what he asks. Please? I follow him into the living room because I'm terrified of what he might do if I refuse. That's the thing no one talks about with people like Richard, the low-level dread that comes with standing your ground against someone who's been in your life forever, someone everyone else thinks is wonderful. The guilt of being suspicious of a man who's been nothing but kind. We sit down, and he offers me tea. I decline. He settles into the armchair across from me, and I notice he's moved some of the furniture around. My mother's favorite reading chair is gone from the corner. The photographs on the mantel have been rearranged. I know this whole situation is confusing, Richard says carefully. And I want you to understand that I never expected your mother to leave things to me. It was a complete surprise. But she was very clear about what she wanted. And I want to help you, if I can. Help me how? I ask, and I can hear the edge in my voice. Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, he says, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, the picture of sincerity. Your mom was struggling financially before she passed. The medical bills were mounting up, the property taxes were getting harder to manage. She was worried about you, about your future. I think that's part of why she wanted to make sure the estate was in stable hands. My hands clench into fists in my lap. But I don't want you to feel abandoned, he continues. So I've been thinking. Once everything is settled, maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement. I could let you stay here if you needed to. Or I could help you with your student loans, something like that. I feel responsible for you, since I've known you since you were so young. It's so calculated, so perfectly designed to seem generous while also being completely insulting. I'll help you with your loans, as if you didn't just steal $200,000 and a house from me. That's thoughtful, I force out. But I'm doing okay. Are you though? His tone shifts slightly, becomes more concerned. I've been a bit worried about you. You look stressed. And I know you've been upset about the will, which is totally understandable. But I don't want this to cause a rift between us. You're like family to me. I stand up abruptly. I should get those things, I say. He looks disappointed, but he doesn't push it. Of course. But if you change your mind about talking, I'm here. Always. I head upstairs to my old room, and my heart is pounding so hard I think he must be able to hear it downstairs. My room looks exactly like it did when I was 18, which is both comforting and depressing. My mother never changed it, kept it like a shrine to my childhood. But what I need is downstairs, in the study where my mother kept her important papers. I wait until I hear Richard go into the kitchen, I can smell coffee brewing, and then I slip back down and head to the study. The door creaks slightly when I open it, and I freeze, listening. He's still in the kitchen, singing to himself in that annoying way he has. The filing cabinet is where it's always been, and I start going through the drawers carefully, trying to remember what Janet said I'd need. Medical records. Correspondence with lawyers or doctors. Anything that shows my mother's cognitive state over the months leading up to the will change. Most of what's here is old tax returns, insurance documents, property deeds. I'm getting frantic, pulling files out and checking them, my hands shaking. Find what you're looking for? I spin around. Richard is standing in the doorway with a mug of coffee, watching me with an expression I can't quite read. My mouth goes dry. Just some medical stuff, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. For my own records. He takes a sip of his coffee. What kind of medical stuff? Just information about Mom's condition. He steps into the room, closing the door quietly behind him. You know, I have a lot of those records too. Some of them are quite detailed. If you need them, I'd be happy to make copies for you. It's not a threat, not exactly. But it feels like one. That's okay, I say. I'll just take what's here. Sure. He smiles that same perfect smile he's been smiling at my family for 15 years. Take whatever you need. But as I gather the files in my arms, I realize he's not moving out of my way. He's standing between me and the door, still sipping his coffee, watching me like he's trying to figure out exactly what I know. #chunk4. The moment stretches out between us, taut and terrible. Richard is still smiling, but something has shifted in his eyes. He knows. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to know that I'm not just grieving. I'm investigating. You know, he says conversationally, I've been thinking about something. When your mom was in her last few months, she talked a lot about you. About your future. She was worried you'd resent her for the medical decisions she had to make. The experimental treatments that didn't work. The money that went to palliative care instead of being saved. He takes another sip of coffee. I think she felt guilty that she was leaving you with less than she'd hoped. I don't say anything. I'm too aware of how small the study is, how far away the door behind him feels. And I told her, he continues, that she shouldn't feel guilty. That sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is make the hard financial decisions so their child doesn't have to. So their child can grieve without also having to worry about money. Richard, I start, but he holds up a hand. Let me finish. I want you to understand something. The will change wasn't my idea. Your mother came to me. She said she wanted to make sure the house was protected, that it wouldn't be seized for debts or taxes or whatever else life might throw at you. She wanted a safety net for you, even if you didn't understand that at first. The files in my arms feel heavy. I shift them slightly, and one slips, falling to the floor. Richard doesn't bend to pick it up. Neither do I, that's not what happened, I say quietly. Isn't it? He tilts his head. How do you know? Were you here for those conversations? Did your mother tell you she changed her will? She wouldn't have done it without. Without what? His voice is sharper now, the friendliness finally cracking. Without your permission? Since when do adult children get to approve their parents' financial decisions? My chest is tight. I realize I'm holding my breath. I think, Richard says slowly, that you're confused right now. You're grieving, and you're looking for someone to blame. And I understand that. I do. But making accusations about your mother's mental state? Suggesting that she was somehow manipulated into making her own decisions? He shakes his head sadly. That's not going to bring her back. And frankly, it's going to look pretty bad if you pursue it. Is that a threat? The words come out before I can stop them. No. He sounds genuinely hurt by the suggestion. It's a reality check. I have documentation. Emails where your mom asked me to help her with a will. A letter she wrote to me, years ago, actually, saying that if anything happened to her, she wanted me to make sure you were taken care of. And I have something else. He pauses, letting the silence hang. I have her doctor's notes. The ones that show she was perfectly mentally competent right up until the end. The ones that will completely support my version of events. My stomach drops. Of course he has the doctor's notes. He was there at every appointment. He drove her to every one. I don't want to fight you on this, Richard says, and he actually sounds sincere. But if you pursue it, I will defend myself. And I will win. You know that, right? You have to know that. I do know it. That's the worst part. I know it because I've already talked to Janet, who explained in clinical terms exactly how difficult these cases are to prove, how many elderly people change their wills late in life, how many family members contest those wills and lose. What do you want? I ask. Want? Richard seems genuinely taken aback. I don't want anything. I want you to be okay. I want you to accept that your mother made a decision that I think came from a good place, even if you can't see that right now. You want me to drop a lawsuit. He doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he moves to the side, finally clearing the doorway. I want you to talk to a therapist, he says. Someone who specializes in grief. Because I think you're not in a good place mentally right now, and I think pursuing this legal action is going to make everything worse. Not better. I walk toward the door, and he doesn't stop me. But as I pass him, he says quietly, your mother loved you very much. She told me that. She also told me she was terrified you'd waste your life being angry at her, the way you've always been angry at her. She wanted better for you. I freeze. Don't. I'm just telling you what she said. Don't you dare tell me what my mother said. I turn to face him, and I'm shaking with rage now. Don't you dare pretend you knew her better than I did, or that you understood what she wanted better than. I stop myself. Janet's voice again, asterisk, don't lose your temper with him. Don't give him ammunition, asterisk. I'm leaving, I say instead, and I walk past him, up the stairs, and out of the house. In my car, I sit with the file spread across the passenger seat, my hands shaking so badly I can barely hold my phone. I dial Janet's number, and she picks up on the third ring. He confronted me, I say, not bothering with hello. He knows I'm gathering evidence. And Janet, he has documentation. He says he has emails from my mom asking him to help with the will, and a letter from years ago, and I can hear the panic in my own voice. Slow down, Janet says calmly. Tell me exactly what he said. I recount the conversation, and when I'm done, there's a long pause. This is actually good, Janet finally says. Good? He basically threatened me. No, he offered you a way out, he wants you to drop the case. That means he's scared. Innocent people don't usually try to negotiate when they're accused of crimes. They let the truth speak for itself. But I'm not sure she's right. Richard sounded so confident. So certain that he would win. There's something else, I say. He mentioned that he has my mom's medical records. Her doctor's notes. He said they prove she was mentally competent. Did he show them to you? No. Then we can't verify them. And he may be bluffing. Janet's voice is steady. Listen to me. The fact that he's pushing back this hard, the fact that he's trying to convince you to drop the case, that tells me we have a real case here. We're going to need those doctor's records, though. Real ones. Can you get them? I don't know, I admit. He has access to everything. Then we'll subpoena them. We can request them through discovery. Don't worry about that right now. Just focus on what you found. I look at the files on my passenger seat, and I realize that the conversation with Richard has changed something. It's made this real in a way it wasn't before. This isn't about grief anymore, or confusion about what my mother would have wanted. This is about someone who exploited her, and who is now trying to intimidate me into silence. I'm not going to be silent. Chunk 5. The next morning, I wake up with a clarity that feels almost violent. I barely slept. I spent most of the night on my laptop, creating a timeline of events, cross-referencing dates, trying to map out exactly when Richard's influence over my mother seemed to shift from neighborly concern to something darker. The files are still spread across my desk, organized by category now: medical, financial, social. Evidence. My phone buzzes at 7:47 a.m. It's a text from an unknown number. Asterisk hi, this is Karen Mitchell. I'm a friend of your mother's. I heard about the situation and I think we should talk. Can you meet me somewhere? Richard doesn't know about this asterisk. I stare at the message for a full minute before responding. Karen Mitchell. The name is vaguely familiar. I remember Mom mentioning a woman from her book club, someone who used to visit before she got too sick. But I don't remember her being close to my mother, not the way I remember Richard always being there. When and where, I type back. She suggests a coffee shop across town, somewhere Richard wouldn't likely be. That detail, the paranoia embedded in her suggestion, makes my skin prickle with something between hope and dread. We meet at 11. Karen is smaller than I expected, maybe in her 70s, with gray hair cut in a neat bob and worry lines that seem permanently etched into her forehead. She orders a tea and sits across from me in a corner booth, checking her phone nervously. I wasn't sure whether to contact you, she says without preamble. After your mother died, I kind of withdrew. Didn't know what to believe. But then I heard you were taking legal action, and I realized I had to say something. Say what? I lean forward slightly. That I think something was wrong, Karen says. I noticed it the last year or so of your mother's life. Richard was always there. Always. He'd visit, and he'd stay for hours. And your mother, she started acting differently around him. More anxious. She'd laugh less when he was around, even though he was supposed to be helping her relax during such a difficult time. My chest tightens. Did you tell anyone? I mentioned it to another friend from the book club, but... Karen shakes her head. We were all kind of in denial, I think. Your mom was dying, and Richard was the one showing up consistently. Your mom was so grateful for him. How do you question someone's motives when they're literally helping a dying woman with groceries and transportation? It feels ungrateful. It's not, I say quietly. I know that now, Karen says. But what really got me, what made me reach out to you, was a conversation I had with your mother about 4 months before she died. She was having a good day, clear-headed. We were sitting in her kitchen, and she mentioned that Richard had asked her to change her will. She said it so casually, like it wasn't a big deal. Just mentioned it like he'd asked her to pick up milk. I don't trust myself to speak. I asked her why he'd ask about that, Karen continues, and she got quiet. She said he was worried about you. That he wanted to make sure you'd be okay if something happened to her. And I remember thinking it was odd because, I'm sorry to be blunt, but Richard wasn't her son. He wasn't even technically family. Why would he care so much about your financial security? What did my mother say when you asked her that? She changed the subject, Karen says. Got upset, actually. Said I was being judgmental. That Richard had been kinder to her in her final months than her own family had been. She pauses, and I see something like guilt cross her face. I think she meant you, actually. She said you weren't visiting as much as she'd hoped. That you seemed resentful about having to be her caregiver. The words hit like a punch. I quit my job to take care of her. I know. I'm not saying she was right. I'm just telling you what she said. And looking back, I think Richard might have encouraged that narrative. That you were resentful, that you weren't truly supporting her, that he was the only one who really understood what she needed. We sit in silence for a moment. A family with 2 young kids settles into the booth next to us, and I'm acutely aware of how normal everything looks, how the world just continues on while mine feels like it's cracking apart. There's more, Karen says. She pulls out her phone and scrolls to something. I've been thinking about this for weeks, but I just found this email thread with some other friends from the book club. It's from about 6 months before your mother died. We were planning a surprise visit, a whole group of us wanted to come over and spend an afternoon with her. Your mom was supposed to organize it, and she sent out an email asking us all to come on a specific Saturday. She turns the phone toward me. The email is from my mother's account, dated almost exactly 6 months before her death. But the tone is strange, overly formal, not like my mother's usual warmth. Read the response thread, Karen says. I scroll through. 3 of the women had responded enthusiastically. My mother had thanked them. But then, 2 days later, there was another email from my mother, apologizing and saying they needed to cancel. She said she wasn't feeling well enough for visitors, that she needed to focus on her immediate care needs, and that large gatherings were too overwhelming right now. That's weird, I say, because it is. I remember that weekend. My mother had seemed fine. More than fine, she'd seemed energized that morning, excited about seeing her friends. It is weird, Karen agrees. Because 3 of us called her after getting that cancellation email to check on her. And when we talked to her, she seemed confused. She said she didn't remember planning any gathering. When I reminded her about the email she'd sent, she said she must have been confused about her calendar. I feel my stomach drop. Do you think Richard? I think someone sent that cancellation email from her account, Karen says flatly. Or convinced her to send it. Because your mother seemed genuinely distressed when we called. And then after that, we all kind of backed off. It felt like she didn't want us around. It felt like Richard was her support system, not us. And maybe that was true. But maybe it was engineered to be true. My hands are shaking. I reach for my coffee and almost spill it. I should have said something earlier, Karen says. I know that. But I'm saying it now. And if you need me to testify or provide any kind of statement to your lawyer, I will. Completely. I give her Janet's information. She writes it down carefully, and I watch her do it, thinking about how many people my mother must have had in her life before Richard became her entire world. Before I leave the coffee shop, I call Janet again. I have a witness, I tell her. And she's going to have things to say about my mother's mental state. Real things. Not Richard's version. For the first time since this began, I hear genuine excitement in Janet's voice. Then we have a case, she says. A real case. #chunk 6. The high I feel after meeting Karen lasts about 36 hours. Then, on a gray Wednesday afternoon, everything gets complicated in a way I didn't anticipate. My lawyer calls me into her office for an in-person meeting. That alone is ominous. Our previous consultations have been mostly over the phone or via email. I take an afternoon off work, a retail job I picked up last month that pays barely above minimum wage, and drive across town to Janet's office in a converted Victorian house. She's waiting for me with a folder open on her desk and a look on her face I can't quite read. Not bad, exactly. But not good either. I've been doing some digging, Janet says without preamble. Karen Mitchell was invaluable, by the way. I've already drafted her formal witness statement, and she's indicated she'll testify if necessary. That part is good. But, I say, because there's clearly a but. But I needed to understand Richard's angle. What makes him think he has a legitimate claim to your mother's estate, beyond the will documents themselves? So I looked into his background a bit. She opens the folder and slides a piece of paper toward me. It's a financial document. Bank statements. Richard's in debt, Janet says. Significant debt. Credit cards maxed out. A car loan he's 3 months behind on. Medical bills from a hospitalization about 2 years ago. He's not exactly flush with cash. I stare at the numbers. They don't surprise me as much as they should. Of course he was desperate. Of course that was part of this. There's more, Janet continues. I had a private investigator look into his employment history. He was fired from his last job, the one he had when your mother first became terminally ill, for what the HR report vaguely describes as inappropriate conduct toward a vulnerable individual. The company won't elaborate, but the timeline is interesting. That was 3 years ago. About 6 months before he started ingratiating himself into your mother's life. The room feels smaller suddenly. So he's done this before. Not necessarily, Janet says carefully. But he may have tried. Or been accused of trying. The company's silence suggests they settled something quietly. It's a pattern of behavior we might be able to establish, but we'd need to find the person involved and convince them to talk. Can you do that? My investigator is working on it. But I'm not going to lie to you, this is where things potentially get ugly. When we start painting Richard as a serial predator, as someone with a history of targeting elderly people, he's going to come back hard. His legal team will argue that we're defaming him, that we're making wild accusations without concrete proof. They'll subpoena everything. Your medical records, your financial history, your relationship with your mother. They'll try to prove that you had motive, that you knew you were about to lose your inheritance and decided to fight back. I feel something cold settle in my chest. I did lose my inheritance. And I am fighting back. That's not a lie. No, Janet agrees. But the way you say it, and the way they'll present it in court, are two very different things. They'll make it sound like you're a vindictive daughter angry that your mother made different choices with her own property. They'll question whether you really were such a devoted caregiver or if you were just positioning yourself to control her assets. That's not fair. No, Janet says. It's not. But litigation rarely is. She slides another document across the desk. I also found something else. A cease and desist letter sent to you 8 days ago. Did you get it? My stomach drops. What? No. I haven't gotten anything like that. It would have been delivered by a courier service, or possibly certified mail. Dated last Friday. Richard's attorneys are telling you to stop making defamatory statements about him and to cease your frivolous legal action or they'll countersue you for damages. Can they do that? Can they file a countersuit? Yes. Will it necessarily succeed? Probably not, given what we have. But they can file it, which means you'll be sued back, which means this gets exponentially more expensive and complicated. And they know that. This letter is a pressure tactic. I haven't been home much, I've been doing extra shifts at work to afford Janet's retainer. I'm staying with a friend on most nights. My apartment, where I've lived for 4 years and where my mother died, feels haunted now. Haunted by the fact that I didn't see what was happening. That I was so focused on managing her medical care and the logistics of her dying that I didn't notice someone was slowly erasing me from her life. Have they served you with the cease and desist officially? I ask. Not yet. This is advance notice, basically a threat. But it's coming. When it does, you need to be prepared for the fact that this isn't just about you trying to reclaim your inheritance anymore. This is becoming adversarial in a way that most people find deeply stressful. I'm already stressed, I say. This is a different kind of stress, Janet says. This is the kind where your life starts getting examined under a microscope. Where every choice you made during your mother's illness could be weaponized. Where deposition might last 8 hours and you'll be asked the same question 17 different ways trying to make you contradict yourself. Where you have to relive the worst period of your life repeatedly, in front of strangers. I don't say anything. I'm thinking about my mother, about how she changed in those final months. How Richard changed her. How the woman I was supposed to inherit from slowly became someone shaped by his presence and his needs and his agenda. I want to keep going, I say finally. Even if it's hard. Janet nods slowly. I believe you. But I need you to understand what you're signing up for. This isn't just about justice. This is about whether you're willing to go through hell to prove a point. It's not about proving a point, I say. It's about my mother. It's about what he did to her. I know, Janet says. And she sounds like she means it. But he's going to make it about you. He's going to make it look like you're fighting for money, not justice. And you need to be ready for that. I leave her office with copies of the cease and desist letter, a list of things not to post on social media, and the sinking realization that this just became personal in a way I wasn't prepared for. The fight, it turns out, is just beginning. #Chunk7. The cease and desist arrives on a Thursday while I'm at work, folded inside a FedEx envelope that requires my signature. I sign for it without reading the label, just shoving it in my locker until my shift ends. When I finally open it in my car in the parking lot, my hands are shaking so badly I can barely unfold the pages. The language is cold and clinical. Your client is hereby directed to cease and desist from any and all defamatory statements regarding Richard Caldwell. The words blur together. There's a list of things I'm apparently not allowed to do: contact his employers, speak to his acquaintances, post anything on social media that could be construed as damaging to his reputation, continue legal action without grounds, make accusations of elder abuse without evidence. Without evidence. As if Karen's testimony doesn't matter. As if the changed will doesn't matter. As if the fact that my mother was coherent enough to discuss her garden with Karen but apparently coherent enough to completely overturn her decades-long plans to leave me her home doesn't matter. I call Janet from the parking lot. Expected and anticipated, she says, all business. Don't panic. This is textbook intimidation. They're hoping you'll get scared and back off. Am I allowed to tell people what happened? Like, can I just explain the situation to my friends? Depends on the context and who you're telling. You can discuss your own case with people you trust. You shouldn't be posting it online or making public statements designed to damage his reputation. There's a legal distinction between private conversation and public defamation. But honestly, I'd advise against talking about it at all until we've prepared you properly. These things have a way of getting back to people. Someone you tell tells someone else. Suddenly it's being characterized as a smear campaign. I feel the walls closing in. There's something else, Janet says. I got a call from Richard's attorney this morning. He's claiming that you've been harassing him. That you showed up at his place of work 3 weeks ago trying to intimidate him. The world tilts. I never did that. I don't even know where he works now. I know you didn't. But he's saying you did, and he's claiming he has witnesses. He's building a counterclaim that you're the one engaging in tortious conduct. He's framing this as you being obsessed with him, unable to accept your mother's decisions, and now taking out your anger through the legal system. I want to scream. Instead, I grip the steering wheel until my knuckles turn white. The smart play, Janet continues, is to let him make threats he can't back up. If he claims you harassed him and has no evidence, that works in our favor. But you need to be very careful now. Don't contact him. Don't go near his property. Don't try to reach out to him or to anyone in his life. Everything you do can and will be used against you. So I just, what? Do nothing? You let me do my job. You stay employed, keep your head down, and you prepare yourself for the fact that when we go to court, he's going to paint you as an unstable, bitter daughter who couldn't handle her mother's independence. After I hang up, I sit in my car for 20 minutes without turning the key. A woman walks by and gives me a concerned look, as if she's worried I might do something dramatic. I almost laugh at that. My life has become so thoroughly surreal that I'm the kind of person who sits alone in parking lots in the dark. The next morning, I wake up at my friend Sarah's apartment with a panic attack. It's subtle at first, just a tightness in my chest that I try to breathe through, but it escalates. My heart is suddenly racing, my vision narrows, and I'm convinced for about 4 minutes that I'm having a heart attack. Sarah finds me on the bathroom floor, hyperventilating, and just sits with me while I cry. You need to talk to someone, she says quietly. A therapist or someone. This is too much. I know she's right. But I can't afford it. Between Janet's retainer and my poverty wage retail job, I'm barely covering the basics. Therapy is a luxury item I don't get to have. That afternoon, I get a call from a number I don't recognize. It's the private investigator Janet hired. I found the woman, he says without introduction. The one Richard allegedly targeted at his previous job. Her name is Dorothy Chin. She worked in the same company, same department. She's retired now and living in Oregon, but I got her contact information if your lawyer wants to pursue it. Did he do the same thing to her? I ask. Did he try to take money from her? Can't say for certain. The settlement agreement was sealed. But I can tell you that Dorothy took early retirement on a very generous severance package, and according to my sources, Richard was specifically mentioned in her complaint to HR as having made inappropriate advances and made her uncomfortable. The woman was in her 70s. Very wealthy. Very vulnerable. The confirmation should feel like a victory. Instead, it makes me feel sick. Your lawyer will need Dorothy's permission to contact her, the investigator continues. And I'll be honest with you, she's probably going to be reluctant. People who've been victimized like that don't always want to relive it for a court case. But she'll at least know what she's dealing with. She might be willing to help if she knows he's doing it again. I thank him and end the call, but my mind is spinning. This is real. This isn't just me being paranoid or vindictive. There's a pattern. There's history. Richard has done this before, probably successfully, which means he's good at it. Which means he knew exactly what he was doing with my mother. That night, I check my email and find a message from an unknown address. Stop while you still can. You're going to lose everything. He has lawyers you can't afford to fight. I immediately forward it to Janet, but my hands are still shaking. It could be anyone. A friend of Richard's. Someone hired by him. A random person who took his side. It doesn't matter. The message is clear, I'm alone in this, and everyone knows it. I look at my bank account on my phone. I have $4,200 left in savings. Janet's retainer was $5,000, and we haven't even gotten to the expensive part yet. The depositions. The trial. The months of legal warfare that Janet warned me about. For the first time since this started, I genuinely wonder if I can actually win this. Or more importantly, if I can survive the process of trying. #Chunk8. The deposition happens on a Tuesday morning in a conference room that smells like stale coffee and expensive leather chairs. Richard sits across from me for the first time in months, and I'm struck by how ordinary he looks. No horns. No visible corruption. Just a man in a blazer with a pen in his hand, looking vaguely annoyed. Janet had prepared me for this. Don't get emotional, she'd said. Don't react to anything he says. Let him talk. Sometimes people hang themselves if you just give them enough rope. But watching him sit there, watching him avoid my eyes, I'm flooded with something I wasn't expecting, pity. Not for what he did, never that. But for what he's become. A man so desperate, so hollow, that he needed to steal from a dying woman to feel like something. His lawyer is aggressive and slick, asking me questions designed to make me look unstable. Isn't it true that you were struggling financially before your mother's passing? Yes. Isn't it true that your mother mentioned feeling burdened by your dependence on her? That's a lie, and Janet objects immediately. But the seed is planted. They're going to paint this as desperation, not theft. Then Janet stands up. I have a witness, she says calmly. Dorothy Chin. She's prepared to testify regarding a previous incident with Mr. Caldwell that occurred approximately 8 years ago. Richard's entire body goes rigid. His lawyer actually goes pale. Dorothy Chen has signed an affidavit detailing an eerily similar pattern of behavior. Befriending an elderly, wealthy woman. Providing assistance and companionship. Gradually manipulating her into financial changes that benefited him directly. Sound familiar? Richard's lawyer is on his feet. We were not notified, this is clearly a violation of discovery rules. She was contacted last week, Janet continues, her voice like ice. And she's willing to testify that she has documentation. Medical records from the time period showing she was experiencing early cognitive decline. Her own notes about how uncomfortable his advances made her. And a very detailed memory of the specific arguments he used to convince her to change her will before she caught herself and reversed the decision. The room goes quiet. What Janet doesn't say, what she saves for the email she sends me later that night, is that Dorothy Chen had recorded one of their conversations. A conversation where Richard, believing he was being supportive, had told my mother's mirror image, your daughter doesn't really understand your needs the way I do. You deserve to be with someone who actually listens. Dorothy had been smart enough to record it. She'd been lucky enough to catch the pattern before it consumed her life. I wasn't as lucky as Dorothy Chin. But I had Janet. And I had the truth. The settlement comes through on a Thursday. Richard agrees to transfer the house back to me. He agrees to pay $185,000 in damages, plus all of my legal fees. In exchange, I agree to a non-disclosure agreement that prevents me from discussing the details of the case publicly. Janet explains the numbers. It's not everything. It's not a trial. But it's a victory. He's essentially admitting that what he did was wrong by paying this much to make it go away. And the house, that's huge. That was your mother's, and now it's yours again. I should feel triumphant. Instead, I feel hollow. I drive to the house, my house, on a Saturday afternoon. I haven't been back since the will was changed. My key still works. The door swings open to a space that's exactly as I remember it, except everything feels smaller somehow. The kitchen where my mother taught me to make her famous lasagna. The living room where she watched her stories while I held her hand during chemo. The bedroom where I slept on a chair for 3 months straight so I could wake up if she needed anything. Richard hasn't changed anything. It's like he was never here, or like he understood on some level that this place belonged to someone else all along. I sit on my mother's bed, my bed now, and I finally cry. Not angry tears. Just sad ones. The kind that come from finally being able to stop fighting and feel everything I'd pushed down for months. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Sarah. How does it feel? I don't know how to answer that. How does it feel to win something you never should have had to fight for in the first place? 3 weeks later, I'm sitting across from a therapist. The settlement covered my legal fees, and I decided to use a small portion of the damages to cover therapy. It's an investment in your mental health, Janet said. You've been through trauma. Actual, real trauma. You deserve support. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Reeves who doesn't treat me like I'm crazy for sitting alone in parking lots, asks me what I'd do differently if I could go back. I don't know, I admit. If I don't fight, Richard keeps the house. Keeps the money. My mother's memory becomes just another victim on his list. But fighting nearly destroyed me. Did it? Did it what? Nearly destroy you? Because you're sitting here. You're alive. You're moving forward. You won a case that most people would have given up on. I think about the panic attacks. The insomnia. The terror of opening my mailbox. I survived it, I say finally. Yes, you did. I returned to the house on a Tuesday evening in spring. The mortgage is paid off, that was part of the settlement, and the place is mine. Really mine. Not inherited, not stolen, but mine because I fought for it. I plant flowers in the garden where my mother used to sit. Pink roses, her favorite. I'm not particularly good at gardening, but I figure she'll forgive my incompetence. I'm trying. I get a job at a nonprofit that pays better than retail. It's not much, but it's something. I'm not rich. The settlement covered the legal fees and gave me a financial cushion, but I'm not suddenly wealthy. What I am is solvent. Stable. Able to imagine a future that doesn't involve panic attacks or constant financial terror. Sometimes I wonder what happens to Richard. The non-disclosure agreement keeps me from discussing specifics, but I know he moved cities. I know he's starting over somewhere else, looking for the next vulnerable elderly person. The thought makes me sick, but I've learned that some things I can't control. What I can control is this, my mother's house. Her garden. Her memory. The fact that I didn't let her down when it mattered most. I sit on the porch one evening, watching the sun set through the trees, and I think about how strange it is that sometimes justice doesn't feel victorious. It just feels like relief. It's enough. It has to be enough. And maybe, finally, it is.